We're getting ready to start this section here, the book of Genesis, and it's titled really The Confusion of All Things. Now let's go through where we've been in Genesis, okay? Let's get a little review of that. First of all, it was the creation of all things. That's in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. That tells us about God's creative work. He created everything from nothing, and it all exists because of Him. He created everything perfect and beautiful, and He said it was very good. Everything was just the way God intended it for. Man was made in His image, made eternal, and Genesis 1-2 is a beautiful story of that creative work. The second thing in the book of Genesis that is very important is the corruption of all things. The corruption of all things. And what caused the corruption in Genesis 3?
Sin.
Sin. The entrance of sin. Disobedience. And the disobedience caused things which was perfect to become corrupted. We are still in the image of God, but we're marred from sin. Okay, that's the reason, that's the reason we're in the shape we are today. Sin came into the world. What were some of the results of sin?
Death.
Well, death is a very evident one, isn't it?
Sickness.
Sickness and disease, yeah.
Thorns.
Pardon?
Thorns.
Thorns, yeah, it even affected all of creation. The old, that was a part of the curse upon the old earth, the thorns, yeah. Sure did. So all creation was changed at that point. So we have the entrance of sin, disease, the entrance of death, the entrance of the changes in the creation work. All these things is the corruption. So what we see then after the corruption of all things, the Bible records what? The decline of humanity. And what it shows is when man leaves God out of the picture, what happens? It becomes a very ugly picture of society. And so that takes us to the third part, was the condemnation of all things. Creation, corruption, and condemnation. That's in Genesis 6-9. And that's when God judged the earth for their sin. And He found one man, a family that found grace in His sight, Noah. And through Noah, he had an instruction to build the ark, save his family, and was going to rebuild. So we see God's condemnation because of the wickedness of man. And things got very, very wicked from the time of creation to the time of the flood. And we believed, as we talked about, there was extreme satanic involvement. Now, the reason there was such extreme satanic involvement was that Satan had declared war on God, basically, in God's creation. After, we understand the passages of the other passage about Lucifer being kicked out of heaven for his pride, and he came in to usurp the authority of God over His creation, and he got Eve and Adam to fall into sin. And he became the god of this world, and Satan's his only goal was to destroy what God had created perfectly, and he did. He was doing a good job at it. He got man away from God. He got them to fulfill all their desires of wickedness, to the point that God, actually in His mercy, had to destroy things, because if He would have let things keep on going with all of the satanic influence and all the evil wickedness, just think how much worse it would have got. It was, in fact, as we do know, as we studied the satanic thing in Genesis 6, some of the angelic, Satan, demonic activity going on was so terrible that He changed some of those up so they could not even do anything like that again to humanity. So whatever forces of demonic activity was involved at that time was so severe that God stepped in and even chained them. The book in the Bible tells us for this time. So that's where Genesis 6 through 9. So after we have Noah come off the boat, there's the three kids, Ham, Japheth, and Shem, and their wives, and they begin to repopulate the earth. We looked about how that was possible and how many years it would take to really start getting big population numbers up. And so at the end of Genesis 9, we see that God made some covenant things with Noah. The basic forms of government was beginning to form now with sinful man. Even the things about if you took someone's life, you have the right to take that life. So capital punishment was involved. A lot of things was going. God promised Noah he wouldn't destroy the earth anymore by water. So these were some things after that. Tonight we're going to look basically a little bit in 10 and 11 about the confusion of all things. Now the confusion of all things involves a man's attempt once again to leave God out of the picture and rebel by building their way to worship. And we're talking about the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. And so we may say, well, what is so wrong with a big building project? We're going to look at that. What's so wrong with a big building project? We're going to look at what was so wrong with that. And so we're going to look at the confusion of all things. And first of all, in our outline here is the sin involved, and the word he uses is union. Man did not want to obey God by dispersing throughout the world. Before this time, and even before the flood times, God had planned man to live more together, and he gave them a common language, so man was able to communicate. But as usual, Satan gets involved and perverts things, and so man found out they stay together and just put all their resources together, they'll have greater influence to do what they want to do. And so let's look at this here, how they wanted to go. And it says in chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Now we'll come to a minute again about where Shinar is in just a second. But there's a passage in chapter 10 that gives us some insight upon the ringleader of this movement in Babel. And he was a man by the name of Nimrod. Okay? And Nimrod in chapter 10, verse 9 and 10, he was a mighty hunter. Now he's one of the descendants of Noah. And so he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it was said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and erected Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. There's so many things in there. First of all, he's called a mighty hunter. Now, understand he's not talking about a hunter here like we think of in West Virginia. He's not like the great deer hunter. He's not like the man that could shoot the bow and arrow, 200 yards through a deer's heart or something. Okay. The idea of this man was he was a mighty warrior, a very powerful man. Now the Bible here uses the word hunter, but he's not really hunting animals. He was hunting in this world and prowling around, taking power. And he becomes the leader of this world of the time of Babel. Nimrod was, and so he, I think, probably headed up everybody, saying, we don't need this scattering thing. And I know Noah said that God told us to do that, but Grandpa Noah, he was getting senile, and we don't need to listen to Noah. We need to stay together. We need to keep our forces together so we can make more of it. And I think we should decide. I can just see him preaching and say, we need to decide who we're going to worship and who we're going to do this stuff with. And so he gathers the people, and it's in what would be our modern day Babylon, or it would be where we call it Babylon, it would be in the modern day Iraq area. And so as we see this, it's amazing there of that land of Shinar becomes a focus of rebellion in the Bible. it becomes a focus of people going their own way. It was there at the Tower of Babel. It was there that the Babylonian Empire developed. It was there that Nebuchadnezzar was a result of power. And it was always, very arrogant in what they wanted to do and always opposing the ways of God. In fact, in the last days, God even talks about the last government, the last group of people that's opposing the will of God and the ways of God in the book of Revelation is called Babylon. So Babylon became the symbolic with rebellion against God, of going your own way, doing your own thing. And so Nimrod and his people decided to do this, and in the land of Shinar, or in modern day Iraq. And a few more verses there. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had a brick for stone and slime for they had for mortar. And he said, "Go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach into the heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." You see, that was that God told them to scatter, and they said, "No, we're not going to scatter." Rebellion. And they was building a tower. Now, it wasn't like they was really trying to build a tower up to the moon or somewhere. They really, they couldn't do that. But they wanted a tower reaching up to God, to their way. In ancient, I'll read a couple things here in just a minute, but in ancient Iraq, ancient Babylon world, they found these other places that were built, either like this or one of these other ones, that reached up into the heavens, and there's a term for that. They're called a ziggurat. Not a cigarette, a ziggurat. Okay? A ziggurat is something that was used for the worship of false gods. And this is what the people of Babel was building. And many believe it was the beginning of astrology, a beginning to reach into the heavens, to worship the sun, moon, and the stars. And this is, after this, God has always condemned those who worship this. And this has always been a desire for mankind to worship the sun, moon, and stars. And, people still, what do you call those things you read in the papers all the time about your... What is it? Yeah, astrology, horoscopes, and all that stuff. And they say, okay, the stars align this way. If you're born this way, this is your thing. So there's something about Satan has drawn people into thinking that they can find answers through these stars and things. Not through God and the Bible, it's through the stars. And this is what these people were beginning here back in the pre-Abraham days, the post-Noah days. I got a little few things about here. The archaeological evidence suggests that the Tower of Babel was in reality a building giving over to astrology, or the heathen worship of the heavens. Among the ruins of ancient Babylon is a building 153 feet high and with a 400-foot base. Now this is, you've got to think about something that's found after all these years. That's a pretty big structure, 153 feet. That would be about like if there's 10 feet a story in a building, that's like a 15-story building. So that 400-foot base, that's bigger than a football field. So this was some major work going on here in this thing. Okay, you understand here what they were building. It was constructed of dried bricks in 7 stages to correspond with the known planets to which they were dedicated. It says the lowermost part was black, the color of Saturn, the next orange for Jupiter, the third red for Mars, and so on. These stages were surmounted by a lofty tower on the summit of which were the signs of the zodiac. And as Dr. Donald Gray Barnhouse wrote, it was an open, definite turning to Satan and the beginning of devil worship. This is why the Bible everywhere pronounces a curse on those who consult the sun, the moon, and the stars of heaven. And so we see here Their attempt here was very much planned out to do their thing and worship the way they wanted to worship. And, it's amazing to me, too, that they're not that many years from the destruction of all things. Okay? These people, they're not that many generations from Noah. Okay? It had been very evident, Noah, that it had passed down to his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He said, that, hey, God destroyed this world once for people's disobedience. And Noah said, I was there. I saw the flood waters. I saw the hand of God come down for rebellion. And so here's just a few hundred years, possibly, after the time of Noah. They just forget about it. The most devastating event in all of humanity so far was Noah's flood. It totally changed the landscape of our world that we live in. It totally changed our climates. It changed the face and the maps of this earth. Everybody was killed, and yet they said, well, we can still do it our way. And that's amazing, the spirit of rebellious man. And it's amazing to me then how Satan can have so much control and deception over humanity. And how the people will follow someone. Here they followed a Nimrod. They said, Nimrod, you will lead us. You know how to lead us. You're a powerful man. You're a strong man. You've got strength. We can trust you and we can follow you. And so they build this tower. Now, the sentence was God decided to break up their party, okay? And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. Now, I like how the Bible sort of describes God in here. Now, the Lord didn't have to, let's take the elevator down and see what's going on down there. He knew it's a description. God says, I think I'm going to show something here. The Lord came down. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. You see, again, remember in Genesis chapter 6, every imagination of their heart became evil. Here they are in Genesis 11, and God says, if I don't do something, their imaginations are going to go that way just one more time. And so God says, okay, I'm going to step in and I'm going to do some things here. It's amazing. We think that if we were all just the same people, we would be better off. If we were all just the same color, if we all just spoke the same language, we'd get along and we would have everything. No, I tried that over here. It didn't work a bit, did it? No, it didn't work a bit. He says, go to and let us go down there and confound their language, so they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence unto the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore his name is called Babel. The original name of Babel has the idea of a gate to heaven. And God sort of changed the name to confusion. Okay, that's always, the Babel then has always become synonymous with confusion. Therefore then it's called Babel, because the Lord did there confuse the language of all the earth, and from this did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth. And so the Lord began to scatter them. Now, all of a sudden they were talking in unity, and pass up the brick, bring us some order, and all of a sudden, they didn't understand a thing they were saying. What did you say? I don't know. And it was back and forth. Could you imagine the problems that we're having? And all of a sudden they got up that morning and they was all speaking one language. How'd you like to do that here at the church? And we all come in here, and before we leave, some of you speak in Japanese, and some of you speak in German, and some of you speak in, Spanish. And we would probably get together here and all those, all the Spanish speaking people will be over here, all the Russian people. You would just sort of get up into your areas to the people that you could communicate with. And so God confused the languages to intentionally to fulfill his command, which was to scatter them. Okay? There's a lot of reason for why he scattered them. It was, number one, the earth was not going to produce the kind of food it did at once, so they probably needed to scatter a little bit to begin to live all right on the earth. There wasn't going to be the great food supplies they were before the flood, so they had to scatter around. They was going to get into their own. Now, when they did this, now you guys listened to a video, I think, there about where the races came from, and that put people in little groups more together out into the different parts of the world. They begin to migrate, and as they begin to migrate, then you have a smaller gene pool as they went. And so there, in the smaller gene pool, there would be these traits that would become more dominant. Okay, maybe some of the darks, if the dark skins would be more dominant. Maybe the shorter people, the shorter would become more dominant. There'd be some people would be more taller, and that would become the way that we sort of divided up in our world that we see today. So you got some people that are more dark-skinned, some people more light-skinned, and all these different groups of people going all around the world. And then the gene pool would stay that way. And since it would stay that way, the other certain things become more dominant. Then you'd have the different colors and the different sizes and, different people all different around the world. And so that's basically how that... you guys got so tickled the other day I listened to the radio, and it was talking about this place way up in Siberia where it's always cold. And it was a K-Love station. They were just joking around talking. He says, when these things, you think these people, when they were migrating, when they headed toward Russia, they thought, didn't they think, well, why would you want to live where it's so cold? He says, they live up there in Siberia and it's never warm. And you'd think, as he said, when they were migrating up, he says, let's just keep going a little further where it gets a little colder. He says, I don't understand that thinking, me either. But that's people, different parts of the world, and you got people living in the cold, you got people living in the warm, you got people living in different places, and that's how we see here now. The confusion of all things scattered at everybody. They went in their own directions, okay? And it's sort of interesting then about how God reversed the Babel curse at Pentecost with the gospel. Because when the gospel was preached, everyone heard their own in their one language. Because it was the good news, the gospel. And there'll be a day when I think we'll all speak one language again. I believe when we get to heaven, when we get into the millennial kingdom, there's not going to be all kinds of languages. Why? Because we won't be in rebellion against God. Once our mankind's hearts is back tuned into God, there will be no need for God to have divided languages. We'll speak with one voice. And with one voice, we'll worship the Lord, won't we? With one voice, we will praise God, and with one voice, we will give Him honor and glory. So, but until then, we have all these different languages. I'm so glad that English has become a predominant language, because at least I can communicate when I go to some parts of the world. If I had other languages, I wouldn't be able to communicate. So that's one good thing about English. It's become a little bit predominant in the world. But anyway, that was the confusion of all things, and people begin to settle. Now, I just want to go through some of in chapter 10. Chapter 10 is probably chronologically it comes after chapter 11, because chapter 10 basically does some areas of some of the sons of Noah, how they sort of ended up in different parts of the world. So this probably took place, of course, after the Babel incident. So not everything in the Bible is chronological. Sometimes it's more typology where they wanted to place it. And so in chapter 10, we see the descendants. And for instance here, the descendants of Japheth. Here's some of the people. Now they got the ancient name, and then quite possibly the more modern name. Now some of these probably can't be 100% sure, because the ancient names is probably they would change many times, maybe over time. But here's Japheth, Gomer, which many people believe that would be the area of Germany. So I would be coming from this group. From what I understand, my ancestors had German roots. Okay, and so a lot of people in America have German roots, and my roots, from what I understand from the Tallman side, was out of that group of people. Then there's the group from Russia, Magog, Tubal, Meshach, Russia. I'm just going to give you the modern names here: Greece, Persia, Italy, Armenia, Spain, and Cyprus. Now this is just in chapter 10. Not every person's listed there. It is a little sampling of some of the sons and grandsons and some of the places they founded, but probably not everything is a complete list. But it gives you an idea. Japheth and his descendants, they went west, okay? And so after the Tower of Babel incident, these groups said, okay, we need to head out. So they started going west. It probably took a long time. It's from Babylon to modern Iraq to modern-day Germany and all these places. You can imagine how long it would take to migrate across those parts of the world and what it would be like. The descendants of Ham, they founded a lot of the Middle Eastern and African, Ethiopia, Cush, Mizraim, Egypt, food to Africa, just to Africa in general, I guess you'd say. And the Canaanites was from Ham. Nimrod there was Babylon and Assyria. Sidon, which is the Phoenicia, Hittite. A lot of you notice in this, a lot of these are some of the enemies of Israel. If you notice, the Canaanites, Hittites, Jebusites, Philistines. So some of the descendants of Ham became some of the enemies of the people of Shem. Because the descendants of Shem, basically there's just two directions. Through Abraham, through the line of Isaac and Jacob, the nation of Israel. In chapter 11, when we get started back into our next lesson, we're going to see the introduction now through Shem, the line of Abraham, which is the most important line in the Bible, for it affects most people. And then also through Abraham is Ishmael and Esau, which is the Middle East Arab countries. So Shem, most of what in the Middle Eastern countries, which would be the people of Israel, and then everybody else there, the Arabs. And it's amazing. Just think how, as we study the future here with Abraham and his life and things, that he didn't trust. Abraham was a great man of faith, but one area he wavered on was the son promise. And of course, that's what brought him to have Ishmael. And boy, oh boy, that's been a problem that's 4,000 years ago, and they're still at each other's throats. 4,000 years ago. And the children of Ishmael hate the children of Jacob. And they fight all the time. The children of Ishmael say, we want the children of Jacob destroyed. And this comes to this line here. So one mistake or one rebellion act can cause much harm. And of Abraham, I'm sure if Abraham would have had to do over, he would have done it. But you can't go back and undo things, can you? But so in chapter 11, then, so we see the confusion of all things, the scattering of all things, and that put people in different parts of the world that we live in. And the beginning of basically the world we know today. And so all of us are from the children of Noah. Okay? In the beginning, everybody came from Adam, but everyone was taken out of the world except the family of Noah. Then after the flood and the coming off the boat, and all of us have our descendants go back to those three people. Most of the big burdens of us here was probably the people of Japheth. I think Philistine. Let me see the Philippines. Okay, which one of your family members here? I'm just trying to.
Sin.
Who?
Sin under Ham.
Ham. Okay, that would be what group of people then? Is this not listed
All the
here?
way down at the bottom. J. Oriental people.
Okay, yeah, there it is. Possible founder of the Oriental people. So there, you come from that group. But see, Ham was a person that it seemed like his descendants had more, they spread out more. And I haven't done a big study on that, but they say many of the original technological advances came through the people of Ham, if you study these countries. So they were very sharp in developing a lot of of that day, the technological advancements of things in society. And that's what I haven't studied that in a lot of detail. But as you can see, the people of Ham covered a lot of territory. The nations of Africa, some of the Middle East, and the Far East. So probably the children of Ham probably had the most influence of scattering people the farthest. Shem's people didn't go too far, did they? They stayed right there with the Abraham group, and then the Japheth's people, they moved to the west and later got on the Mayflower and come to America. Well, that's the sort of the story how we got here, and why we speak different languages, why we're different colors, why we're this way and that way, and why we come from different groups of people. And I think that's something you can count on. Some people always figure, they always wonder, how did we get the way we are, and how did we get different? I think, the Bible's got that answer. I don't think we have to worry about it and try to figure out, how we all ended up differently and all that. I think that's the answer. All the people on the face of this earth today came from these sons of Noah. Any questions or comments upon the things that were studied there this evening? Anything? Nothing? Okay, well, that's all we're going to do on this study this evening, and I hope you enjoyed that. And we're going to get into next time more getting into the next big section of studying Abraham and his descendants, the next big section of the Bible and the importance and influence of that.